Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Good evening. Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsay Davis Stover. And this evening, we're going to be talking about health and fitness. And my first guest is Becky Kaiser, who is the national presenter and educator. And she's also a lifetime studio manager. Becky, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you have a huge following in Northern Virginia. Tell us a little bit about how you originally became just passionate about health and fitness work.
It started when I was young. I knew that from an early age I didn't want to sit behind a desk and do a normal 9 to 5. I played soccer growing up. I danced through college. And so when it came time to finding a job, I just knew that I wanted to do it in the health field so that I could wear spandex every day. And you know, Lululemon's not a bad place to shop.
That's
so
right.
I picked up a profession that would allow me to be active. I kind of followed it. And I didn't know where I wanted to go. I started as a PE teacher, and then I became a fitness instructor, and that just led to making other fitness instructors, and then Lifetime has been kind of my home for the last 5 years.
And tell us a little bit about Lifetime and the fitness opportunities that it offers.
Yes, so we are a lifestyle brand. We're not just a health fitness club. There's Lifetime Work, so you can actually come to our club and do your work. We have a kids academy and they teach actual classes. So there's art class and there's gymnastics. We have 3 hours of kid care. So you can do 2 hours of a workout, get yourself into the sauna, and then pick up your kids. We have Lifetime Cafe. Everything that we have there is healthy. So you know when you're eating there, you're eating smart. We have Lifetime Sport. We're starting in different areas so you can have sports clubs, drop your kids off, and they can do indoor soccer games and basketball games and such like that.
That's incredible. So it's so interesting because these types of facilities and the work you're doing every single day, people are craving right now because we come home and we turn on the news and folks are exhausted by everything that's going on right now. Can you talk a little bit about how it's so important, especially now, to really make smart health and fitness choices?
I think stress is a vicious cycle. If you're eating bad or you're not sleeping enough, the stress that builds up can just lead to more stress. So you can't sleep or you stress eat. So getting yourself as a priority and deciding, 1 hour a day, I'm going to go and show up for myself and go to maybe a fitness class, a cycle class, and have somebody else talk to me and pump me up with motivation. It allows for you to release that energy, that stress level that you are getting from the outside sources, and just reconnect with yourself. So it's just important, even if it's 5 minutes a day, to show up for yourself and work out. But having Lifetime is even a better place to do it for an hour because the people that are around you are just full of positive energy.
And that's such an important point. Making sure you're surrounding yourself, especially at a time like this, with positive people, people that are willing to pump you up, and the importance of that. Can you talk a little bit about that, creating a community of positivity, especially in a time when some people may think it's a fairly negative time in our country and in our life?
I think where your vision goes or what you think about kind of grows with you. So if you are surrounding yourself with things that are positive and in good ways to make yourself feel better, that's almost what you're going to find. If you're looking for a yellow car, you're going to find yellow cars.
Right.
So if you're surrounding yourself and like searching out for positivity and love, then that's what's going to surround you. We created that in our community, in our fitness community too. So just stepping into the room makes you feel better.
That's great. And I know everyone out there is thinking about food choices, and you hear all these different diets, whether it's keto or Atkins or, low carb, whatever it is, paleo. Talk a little bit. I mean, it can get confusing for someone who just wants to fuel their body in a good way. Can you talk a little bit about the best way to navigate all the different things? Because I think sometimes, I know for me in particular, it just can be overwhelming for people.
I think for me it can be overwhelming. There's so much information out there. I always let people know that the scope of practice of a fitness professional is just that, fitness. So nutrition advice always should come from somebody who went to school for that, not the Instagram star that you're looking at.
Right.
But moderation is something that is always a key. So if you're eating too much of something, never a good thing. Eating more plants, eating more colors. Make it really simple on yourself, and remembering that you are unique. So something that worked for your neighbors, not specifically going to work for you. So you really want to be smart about the choices you make and find somebody who can navigate that for you individually.
That's really important, because I think you make a brilliant point. Everyone is so different, right? And trying to do a one-size-fits-all program, it's sometimes hard to do, and you see people trying to fit that into their life, and sometimes it's often hard. So your best advice is do what's best for you.
Exactly. You can't assume that anything that anybody else is doing is going to work for you. You just really have to be smart about trying one thing and seeing, is that making me feel better? Is that making me feel worse? And moving on from there.
That's great. And we live in an area here in Northern Virginia where everyone is so busy and so many people are commuting, and these commutes that we're seeing are 2 and 3 hours sometimes with the traffic. Can you talk a little bit about what are the small things that people can do in their everyday lives that will make a big difference?
Even 5 minutes a day in little chunks can make a big difference. So if you have a 5 minutes, taking the stairs when you get to work instead of riding the elevator, making that choice at lunch to pack your lunch. When you're going home, just remembering that sitting less and moving more is the key. So if you can take your kids out for a walk right after you get home, any small chunks you can do. I never tell people to make these full segments at one time. You want to change one thing at a time. And once that's kicking in, then maybe add on a second thing.
Right. And what is kind of the minimum? I mean, what if there's not the opportunity to get in the gym, there's not the opportunity to take, those 5-minute interval spurts throughout the day? I mean, what is kind of the minimum that people can do? Is there a good just time limit to keep in our minds of, hey, if I can get in the 5 minutes, is that enough? Can you talk a little bit about that?
The CDC recommends 150 minutes of activity a week. So that's about 30 minutes a day.
Okay.
So if you can break up those 30 minutes in your day and give, a couple minutes here and there, just as long as you get about 30 minutes, then you're definitely going to be healthier.
That's great. No, that's really good advice, because I think too, it can be overwhelming when you get home from work, you've been sitting in the car for an hour plus, right? And you're trying to get your kids to art lessons or soccer practice, whatever it is. And you finally find that moment for yourself, and it's 11 o'clock at night, right?
Right.
So just kind of knowing what is the recommended amount of fitness time just to refuel your body, I think is so important as we kind of navigate all of this.
Agreed. And 2 days a week, maybe if you can lift something, make your muscles work. That's also something that's important. As we get older,
sure.
Lifting things is more important for us as well.
Can you talk a little bit about that? So it would be a mix of cardio, things that just get your blood pumping, to lifting the weights. Talk a little bit about what lifting weights, what are the benefits of that, even if it's small weights?
Strength training is a wonderful way for, we're going to lose muscle mass as we age. We hit 30 and we start to lose percentages of muscle mass without doing anything. That's just how our body acts and our hormones work. So getting that push and pull effect and lifting up things that are heavier than our body weight is always going to change just the small changes in our musculature and keep us safe.
Absolutely. And you talked a little bit about, in the beginning, about opportunities for kids. And I think that's really important. And I know you have really done a lot to ensure that your kids are active and the kids in your community are active. Can you talk a little bit about how we can better inspire the next generations to be more active and really value and put a priority on fitness?
I believe that kids are going to do what you do, less what you say. So the most important thing is that you are showing them and modeling that behavior. So it's not just mom and dad are going to work out, you can hang out. It's, hey, why don't we all go do something together, even if it's small. Those are the changes that will show the kids that that's just part of our lifestyle, and that's just what we do. I'm really a big believer in anything that I can do, my kids can do. We have a kids cycle class, 30 minutes long, that we take the kids from 10 to 13 and put them on cycle bikes. And the lifelong lessons they're learning and the confidence they're growing. They don't have to join a sport. I don't have kids that like soccer or basketball, but they love just going to the gym and hanging out on a treadmill for 30 minutes because we get to chat while we're doing it.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's such a big part of it too, is confidence. And I think being able to find ways to instill confidence in children at an early age is so important, because we often see, as we grow up, that confidence gets stripped away. And so I love that piece of it, because you're really building that confidence in the work you're doing. Can you talk a little bit more too about some recommendations that you may have, for those that are just getting into fitness, that maybe have never had a childhood where they were very active, or maybe they were active as a childhood, but as an adult, life has taken over. Can you talk about little ways to just ease back into things? Because I think from what I hear and talking to other parents too, it's something that a lot of people know they should do and want to do, but don't necessarily know how to get back into it.
I think the first thing you need to remember is that you are going to not be good at it. A lot of us don't even try anymore, because if we walk into a fitness class or we walk into that gym, I'm not going to know how to use that equipment, or I'm going to feel unsure of myself. I might fail. What I want to remind anybody that comes to my classes or I meet is that give me 10 minutes. Even if you fail, you know that the next time you come, maybe you can make it 12 minutes. You're going to set goals to better yourself. So it's a no judgment zone wherever you are, and don't look at yourself like I used to be this or used to do this. Take you for where you are right now, that journey that you're on, and just allow yourself that day. Like, I'm going to do it for this day, and then add that next day on.
That's fantastic and really good advice, because we are in an area where everyone is so busy and people are just looking for what they can do to make themselves and their children a little bit healthier. So please stay with us. We'll be right back. More with Becky.
You may have heard people talking about the April 1st United States Census and wonder what it's all about. The census is a count of everyone currently living in the country. It happens once every decade, and it's at the heart of how Fairfax County serves our residents. The census helps determine how much funding Fairfax County receives from the $675 billion that the federal government allocates each year to improve transportation, provide education, health care, affordable housing, and prepare for emergencies. For each resident who does not respond to the census, Fairfax County could lose $12,000 in potential funding over the next 10 years. Imagine if one family of 4 doesn't reply, or 10 families of 4. The amount of lost resources for our community could really add up. The census helps Fairfax County decide where resources go based on where people live, including schools, roads, firehouses, police stations, and clinics. It establishes how many representatives we send to Richmond and Washington, D.C. to advocate for our community. You can have a big impact by completing the 2020 census. The U.S. Census Bureau will mail every household an invitation in March to complete a simple questionnaire about who lives at your address on April 1st. You can respond online, by phone, or by mail. The form will ask for names, age, sex, race, and the relation of everyone living in your household. To ensure a complete and accurate count, census takers visit residents who do not respond. Federal law keeps those responses safe, secure, and confidential. Your name and address cannot be shared with law enforcement, immigration enforcement, or any other government agency under any circumstance. The information is only used to create accurate statistics about the nation's people, places, and economy to help serve our community. In Fairfax County, we believe everyone counts, no matter how young, how old, or your immigration status. If you live here, we want you to be counted. Visit fairfaxcounty.gov/topics/census to learn more, and remember, in Fairfax County, everyone counts.
we're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsay Davis Stover, and I'm continuing the conversation with Becky Kaiser, who is a national presenter and educator and has a large following here in Northern Virginia in terms of fitness. And she's been incredible in giving us ways in which we can ensure that we incorporate fitness into our daily lives. And now that it's March, Becky, I know I'm guilty of this, of making these New Year's resolutions or setting goals for 2020, right? And while for me personally, I got off to a great start in January, March has been a little hit or miss. Can you talk a little bit about goal setting and the importance of goal setting in fitness? And when you fall off the wagon a little bit on those goals, what are some good ways and strategies to get back on track?
Yes, I always, people ask me what motivates you to work out, and it's more of a habit at this point. There's going to be days in everyone's life where you are just not motivated to show up for yourself. So the goal setting is finding goals that are small and specific that will help you reach a target. When I was first losing weight, when I was in the game, I'd have a pair of jeans on the wall that I wanted to reach that size. And it wasn't a scale victory because I really don't weigh myself. But I would look at those jeans, and every couple weeks I would try them on and wait till I hit that goal. And rewarding yourself. I mean, wearing the jeans was a reward enough.
Right.
But other ways, if there is a massage that you really wanted to do. So if you work out 5 days a week for 4 weeks, get yourself a massage. Really setting these goals, but also giving yourself something to look forward to, I think is a really good way to do it. The other thing is you don't have to start on a Monday. You don't have to start at the beginning of the year. Any day can be a Monday.
Right.
Any day can be January 1st. So we get to Fridays and people are like, oh, I'll give up.
Right.
Maybe I'll do it on Monday. Any day is a good day to start.
Well, gosh, I feel like so many people have been guilty of that. I myself think, oh, I'll take the weekend off, right? And that's a really good point. It's always the right time to get back. And I love the idea of something visual as setting your goals, of putting that pair of jeans up, right? And just having something visual to look at. For me, I always put a picture of my daughters up and think, okay, the more active and fit I am, the more I'll be able to keep up with them, right? So I think finding something that's important to you maybe and making it more visual could also be a good way to help get back on track a little bit.
Completely. I love that idea. Mine was more about what I would look good in, and yours is about what I'll help with my kids. So,
well, I think you just have to figure out what it is that's going to motivate you, because for everybody it's different. Okay. And I think that's what's really important. But I love the visual idea, because then it's hard to escape, right? It'll follow you.
Yes.
If it's up on the wall or the refrigerator. And talk a little bit about the rewards. I noticed when you talked about the rewards, you talked about something good for yourself, right? And oftentimes I've been guilty of saying, oh, if I work out for 5 days, that piece of cheesecake is mine on a Saturday. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of setting those healthy rewards for yourself?
Exactly. A lot of people feel like they work out to work off food or bad decisions. And I always think of working out as something pleasurable and something you get to do, and it's not about giving yourself, or punishing yourself for bad decisions that you're making in your past or what you're about to do. It's more about a healthy thing that you're adding on to your life, so why not create a reward that's healthy along with it?
That's great. That's great. And in the last segment, we talked about what kind of is the minimum, right? And we talked about 30 minutes, on average, 30 minutes a day, and what that 30 minutes looks like, whether it's an hour one day, versus 5 the next. You talked about just the importance of moving, right? And I think that's so key. If you had a short amount of time and you were advising a client or someone who, seeks your advice on fitness, what would be the 5-6 things they could do quickly to know that they maximized the time that they had?
Yes, and we get these questions a lot. just 5 minutes of exercise, again, a day is going to add on for you. The deadlift is probably one of the best exercises. It's a pulling movement. You're not going to work, there's no stress on your load-bearing joints, and it's your big muscles. And the backside, we get a lot of stuff happening in the front. We lift groceries, we lift children, but the backside loses that. So a deadlift is going to activate every single muscle in the backside. So that's definitely number one. Number two, a close second is squats. Sorry, I know people love squats, but it's true. Those are the bigger muscles. What I like to say is bigger muscles, bigger return. So if you're getting the big muscles, you're going to burn more calories.
Okay.
Pull-ups. You need a good one for, who loves pull-ups?
Those are painful.
Those are terrible. But those
terrible.
are probably great. They fix your posture. They improve your back strength. A push press is a good exercise as well. And then last, something for your core. Your core is 360 degrees around. So it's not just the rectus abdominis and all those things you see on Instagram, like look at my six-pack. It starts at the ribs, it ends at the knees, it's on the front, on the back. That's the main chunk. If you want to, in the middle of the night, if you have to roll out of bed and get yourself over fast, if your core is weak, that's when we throw our backs out when we're 40, just rolling out of bed.
Right, right. Well, that's a really good point, because I know we talked about, too, in the last segment, how busy everyone is. And so we have a lot of sitting, too, that goes on, whether it's at our desk, at a computer, in the car, commuting. Talk a little bit about how strengthening your core can even help in those situations as well. Yes,
bracing yourself, being ready for a fall. I know as we age, any sort of fall that happens is kind of like the downfall of your health and your deterioration. So being able to brace yourself and allowing yourself, I can wobble, but my core is going to stabilize and I'm able to pull myself back up, is just going to help as we age. Balance is key as well. Those things that people don't think about building. We think about being strong,
right?
But it's the flexibility and the mobility that in the long run that's really going to save our lives. So knowing that your core is the chunk of how we do that is smart. And you can do it, sit it at your desk. You can do core exercises. You can do obliques. There's lots you can do at your desk. Just Google it.
That sounds great. And you talked about flexibility. And it's something we haven't necessarily touched on a lot, but the importance of stretching. Can you talk about that? Because whether or not you're able to get that 2-mile walk in, talk about stretching a little bit, because in the long term, that may be incredibly beneficial for us.
Exactly. We were going to talk about, where is fitness going and what's important. And I think flexibility, mobility, recovery, things that we've kind of avoided in our 20s. We were like, how hard can we do it? How fast can we do it? Right. And then let's go get a beer. And now we're getting those points where we're aching and we're sore. It's because we haven't taken those moments to kind of end the exercise or start the exercise correctly. You have to warm up before you actually start a class. You can't just go in there and do a HIIT class. You're going to need those moments for your body. Your rotator cuffs are going to need to wake up before you start boxing. So just the ability to wake up the muscles before you use them strenuously.
Absolutely. And after a long workout, do you also recommend stretching as just to cool down? How does stretching get incorporated into your daily workout?
Yeah, stretching is, when we end a class, we only give you about 5 minutes of stretching. It's never enough.
Okay.
We always recommend going out onto a floor or doing some rolling afterwards. Just, if you have a lacrosse ball or a foam roller, just finding places in your joints that maybe you're pinching and giving yourself at least 5 to 10 more minutes after that. 10 to 15 minutes of stretching at the end of any workout is going to make you feel better in the end.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And for our viewers that are thinking about getting into fitness, maybe as even a career, talk a little bit about how someone would get into fitness as a career.
Yes, this is asked a lot. And it's one of those careers that could be your second, third, fifth career. You've worked out for a long time and you realize, I love what I'm doing. and as I tell everybody, this is the best job I've ever had. You just need to get a national certification is probably the starting step. So we always recommend ACE or AFA, and you can get those online. There's also courses you can take where you do live practical labs. So we teach you in-house how to talk on a mic, how to organize a class. That's usually a 12-week session, and it's one of the best careers in the whole wide world.
That's great. And you talked a little bit about how it can be a second, third, and fourth career even. Talk about the women that go into fitness and how important it is for women in particular to be lifted up in this area.
Oh, what I love about the fitness job is it's so flexible a schedule. You can bring your kids to work. I mean, how many times can you say that? I can bring my kids. They can be in there and I can teach 2 or 3 classes a day.
That's great.
And earn a living. You can do it really early in the morning before your kids even wake up. You can do it really late at night. There's so many windows. You can work Saturdays and Sundays of opportunity. So it helps your house out. Just being able to work flexibility with your husband's schedule as well. Or just if you're on your own, making sure that your kids have places to go and you can make a career out of this.
That's fantastic. And I know we touched on it a little bit before, but let's talk future of fitness. In the ideal world, how would you like fitness to be prioritized in our daily lives?
I think having professionals and corporations understanding how important having healthy employees is really where the future should be and going, because preventative care is going to cost us a lot less than it is to pay for all these diseases that are happening because we're immobile and because we're sitting down for many hours. So if we can get corporations behind it and paying for their employees to be healthy, I think that's probably the greatest place that health can go, fitness, because the medical careers then aren't worrying so much about having this dump of people who are on sedentary lives and putting people on medications and all the repercussions that come from being unhealthy, because we're stopping it before it even starts.
That's fantastic. And this is a big election year. And every election year, the issues that are so important to people rise to the top. And healthcare continues to be a top issue in our country. So I love where you're going with the future of healthcare.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, thank you. And how can people learn more about you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at @TheFitnessPixie.
Fantastic. Becky, thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for motivating us when it comes to our fitness goals. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Opiates has taken everything and everyone I've ever loved away from me. Everything.
I blew my ankle out and I got prescribed pain pills by my doctor.
If making my detox public is gonna help somebody, I'm all for it. I just wish I would have had a warning.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
Mom! I got it. What are you doing in there?
I got stuck.
Are you a dog?
I wouldn't do that. Have you seen the pliers? Where'd you find those?
It's not your birthday.
Sorry.
Bye, Grandpa.
Bye, Grandpa.
Take care of yourself.
What are you doing? What are you looking for?
Hey, sweetie. What did you learn in school today?
I learned that the 2020 census counts everyone in the U.S. Where there are more people, there are more needs for things like roads, schools, and hospitals.
I learned that billions in funding goes to communities like ours because of the census.
I learned that the Census Bureau collects data about communities in all states and territories of the U.S.
Statistics in Schools offers free educational materials powered by census data. Learn more at census.gov/schools.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsay Davis Stover, and I am excited to have with me in this segment Dr. Susie Carmack, who is at the Department of Global Health and Community Health at GMU. Susie, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. And I could say author, inspire, thought leader, all of these things that you have done in your career. I mean, you have just really been able to be such a force when it comes to finding that balance in the workplace. And I know we're going to get into all of the people that you've helped, but I'd love to start out with just letting our viewers know how you became so passionate about this.
Well, it's a great question, and again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank the department at Mason for allowing me to be here, keeping in mind these are all my own opinions, so we have to make sure we get that out of the way.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting, this whole idea of work and life balance is so funny, isn't it? And you know, the one thing that scholars like myself who are trying to research that, promote that, help people with that, the one thing we all agree on is that it's actually very difficult to attain. So the irony is that we're all searching for this thing that we all have different opinions on and different ways to approach. But to me, that's actually the fascination, and how we can custom fit that to a person, to a team, to an organization, to an agency. You know, the short and sweet version of my career is I started out as a yoga teacher, not surprisingly here in the DC area, attracting a lot of folks that are doing incredible things, many of whom we can't even know what they're doing, right?
Sure.
But they would need some yoga, and they would need specifically one-on-one work because of their busy schedules. So I would get to know them, and I would get to know a little bit of what they could tell me about, you know, that expression, holding the weight of the world on your shoulders. You know, they may have not said it that way, but you could hear, and sometimes there was a lot of struggle. They love what they do, leaders making amazing things happen, but they're human systems too. And so that started me on this fascination for the last 20 years really of how do we help folks that are holding these, you know, truly incredible responsibilities, and how do we help them to optimize their performance so that they can go out and make those things happen and still, you know, be a human and have the self-care and self-compassion that they need. So it's interesting how full circle it's become.
That's great, and you really touched on such an important point in our area. You know, we have so many neighbors and community members that are carrying literally the weight of the world on their shoulders. I mean, we are the home of all of the government agencies, CIA, FBI. I mean, we have an area with really high stress level positions, and you know, and many people wake up waiting to see whether or not something showed up on the front page of the Washington Post, right? And that's the world our area lives in. So that line between work-life balance, I would assume in this area, becomes even more blurred at times.
Absolutely. And then we add in the layer of technology and the access it gives us. It gives us flexibility in some cases for the work we do, not always. But then it also asks us to be on in kind of a 24/7 way. And so it does get fascinating to think about how can we keep up with that? How can we use technology? You know, we're not turning it off anytime soon.
Right.
And I'm sitting here in a production studio with you,
Sure.
so the irony of that is kind of funny.
Right, right.
But you know, I learned when my children were young and technology was taking off and showing my age. You know, the iPhone wasn't out until they were teens, right? So, you know, in the early days, we talked about turning it down and using it less. But now I think it's more about, okay, how can we use it well? How can we take the time for digital detox? We even have a name for that. How can we, you know, and how can we also think about, for folks who are in those leadership roles, you know, be they government or otherwise, how can they be actually great stewards of leadership on their team for managing stress? We'll call it well-being, we'll call it stress management. whatever someone's, okay with. And another layer of the onion is this idea that stress doesn't always have to be negative, right? We can have stress to do wonderful things like getting to be on your show tonight, right? That is a stressful event for my human system, and it's one I welcome, right? But so this idea of how do we help people to really be on that A game in their performance with whatever's being asked of them, and then thinking about the ripple effect that gives our leaders for their own lives and for the people they care for and who care for them, as well as for the important work they do, because there is sometimes that no room for error kind of thing happening.
There is, absolutely. And the work that you have done, I mean, you've worked with some of the largest agencies in our government, DOD, CDC, I mean, just to name a few. Can you talk a little bit about what that work has looked like? Because I know you have really worked to advise top leaders in our country in terms of well-being and balance, but you've also worked within these agencies to help build out campaign plans so that your work doesn't stop with one person. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, it's been an adventure, for sure. And I want to be sensitive to time as well as protocols and all of those things.
Sure.
But what I can say essentially is that it started with this idea of helping individual leaders who would hire me kind of working independently. And then as I grew in that fascination with stress and well-being, I wanted to research that, and I really became fascinated with this idea of promoting health and what was the science of that. And so ironically, I went to Mason to get my PhD, and at the time was a single mom, so I'll always be grateful. It's so nice to now work at Mason after I was that single mom that made it happen, as many single moms out there do, and not single moms, but we all make it happen in our own way. But anyway, I wanted to study that science because I wanted to know more how we could message to people who maybe have different belief systems, different cultural values, different understandings. And so then that work grew, and so the science of communication started to be more of my focus, and so this idea of health communication. So I've been honored to work with teams on how they can communicate better. But the irony is it all comes full circle, because we know that communication and compassion specifically can make a huge difference in how we're managing stress. And that in addition to managing our own human system, as your prior guest gave us great tips on, the ways that we interact affect us as well. And so how can we optimize the way we engage, the way we perform? And these are some of the things that I've been honored to help some of the agencies with, as well as some thought papers on how well-being, for example, for the military is a force multiplier. We take care of weapon systems, we need to take care of the human system, right? And this is not a new idea now, it's taken some time to buy into that concept. And more recently doing work with, earlier I did some work with the World Health Organization, getting the idea of moving at the desk to be valued, and now we have sitting and standing desks, excuse me.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, so I don't take credit for that, but kind of getting the ball rolling on new tech, that space of new technology, and trying to help people to experiment with new solutions, but to not think of it as being only incumbent upon them, that it's really about a team-based approach for us to have success.
Absolutely. And you just talked about something that was so key in our country, is taking care of the human system that you called it. And I think in so many ways we as a country have neglected that. And now many people call a mental health crisis that our country is in. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of really nurturing our mental health? And in our last two segments, we talked about sometimes how the news right now can just affect people in so many different ways. And I think everyone around the country is wrestling with, not only the kitchen table issues, but also what the future holds in many ways. We have had this outbreak of the coronavirus. We've seen the stock market go down, whether you're aligned politically with what's going on or not. I mean, all of these things are adding to this stress and this mental health care. Can you talk a little bit about that crisis and our need to really focus more, not just ourselves, but as a country, on mental health?
Well, I think, it has many layers as well in that discussion, but I think you're bringing up the idea that so much of what we're being asked to look at, whether it's a conversation at the dinner table that gets uncomfortable because we have different opinions happening, all the way out through what we see on our news feed, not necessarily being to our liking. And I don't mean to be kind of diminishing it, that there's so many wide buckets we could be looking at this from.
Sure.
And so we're asked to, if you think of it almost like a sports analogy, let's say I don't play tennis, but let's say we did, and you're that tennis player that's trying to react and slide side by side, trying to, get the ball over the net. That's basically what we're doing when we're constantly being bombarded with stressful events, be they good ones or challenging ones or anything in between. And so when we are in a place of that reaction mode and we kind of don't have control of where we're directing, how we want to push the stress back out, in other words, how we want to transform it into something that's productive, then our body is in that reactive space. And it's hard on us and it's hard on the folks that are around us. Some of the new science of stress is looking at stress contagion, actually as stress as being as contagious as other things. And
wow.
Yes, and researchers in Canada a few years ago, for example, found that a stressed teacher, specifically one who was showing burnout, there were higher cortisol levels, the stress hormone, in their students. And so this idea that we are not just trying to figure it out for ourselves, and the irony is the importance of giving ourselves a break for being human in that we're going to have a hard time, is actually, ironically, a piece of the solution. And that as we manage ourselves, we create a positive ripple effect of those around us, and then quite frankly, vice versa. And so sometimes the conversation, so many of the people in this area and even otherwise, listening, are so committed maybe to helping others with their lives, others with their work, others as servant leaders. But they don't always maybe, they'll kind of wait to take care of themselves after that's done. It's at that bottom of the to-do list.
Sure.
But so one of the things that seems to be a message that's starting to click with some of the work I'm doing now is that as leaders actually flip that equation and think of their own self-care and self-compassion, those messages they're telling themselves, and thinking about being more proactive as opposed to reactive to stress. Not that we know it's all coming, but in the way that we kind of hit that tennis racket back, that's all part of getting the system to start to cope more positively. And that is a kind of a prevention-based approach to mental health promotion. Alongside of that, we also need response. We need to have more availability for folks to get the solutions that they need that may or may not be able to afford, for example. So. There's a lot of complexities there, but I'm, my focus is a bit more on that prevention side. How can we create nurturing teams that support each other, and at the same time, doing all that we can to advocate for more holistic solutions for folks who are having some stress that they're managing.
I love what you said. Stress is contagious, right? And you're so right. You can feel it at home, at work, and how you surround yourself with that. And I think that's a really important message that we don't talk about a lot, that it is contagious and it can spill over into our children's lives and to our home lives as well.
And we teach, we teach our young people to wash their hands, right? And that's especially important now. I think teaching them different coping tools and also showing them that there's different strategies that can work for them can help them to start build that for a lifetime.
That's fantastic. Well, please stay with us. We're going to be right back with Susie, and she now is an Amazon best-selling author. So we're going to talk more about that when we come back.
Cada 10 años, el Censo de los Estados Unidos ayuda a determinar cuánto dinero recibe el condado de Fairfax del gobierno federal para brindar servicios como transporte, educación y vivienda. En marzo de este año recibirá una invitación para completar un cuestionario confidencial sobre quién vive en su hogar en el día del censo, que es el 1 de abril. Puede responder en línea, por teléfono o por correo. Por cada persona que no responda, el condado de Fairfax podría perder $12,000 en fondos federales para servicios públicos durante la próxima década. Imagínense si una familia de 4 no responde o 10 familias de 4. La ley federal mantiene las respuestas del censo seguras y confidenciales. Su nombre y dirección no se pueden compartir con la policía, agentes de inmigración o ninguna otra agencia gubernamental. En el condado de Fairfax queremos que todos cuenten, sin importar su edad o estado migratorio. Si vive aquí, queremos que lo cuenten. Visite fairfaxcounty.gov/topics/censo para obtener más información acerca del censo.
these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rigged out life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsay Davis Stover, and we are continuing this segment with Dr. Susie Carmack. Thank you, Susie, for being with us this evening.
It's a pleasure. It's awesome.
Well, we left that segment talking about basically the mental health crisis in this country, and you gave some really important tools for prevention, and we talked a little bit about how stress is contagious, and I think that was such an important kind of lesson for us to take with us tonight. Can you talk a little bit more in terms of policy? You know, we continuously see in our election cycles, healthcare is the #1 issue people are worried about, whether it's the cost, whether it's the quality of care. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, how Virginia in particular should really tackle some of these policies, because it is so important to people?
Well, I want to, you know, there's a lot here to look at, right? And the lens, as we've talked about, the lens I look at is through the workplace, because if we're spending most of our time at work, how we are and are not being supported in that stress management or that well-being promotion, whatever words work best, that makes a big difference in the quality of our lives, in the way our human system handles the stress, et cetera. And so teaching leaders how to be more inclusive, how to be more responsive, how to be more stress-centric, actually, how to kind of acknowledge and not wait for the bigger things to happen, but actually to create a more prevention-based approach. That's the space I kind of swirl in, right? But at the same time, I think there is a lot that we can be doing, you know, in the sense of encouraging workplaces to actually have internal policies for their teams, and also to link into some wonderful resources that we have nationally, and not so much from a policy approach, but for example, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have a whole suite of different resources that teams and occupational health can use, individuals can sign on and find, and you know, we know that they're based on settled science as well. And so, you know, that would be a kind of a quick win tip that I would give folks right now, that, you know, we hear about the CDC when tough stuff is happening, like it is right now. And there's, you know, thousands of people working there that show up every day with that same commitment, and they're not flinching. They're, you know, they're ready for this, and they're addressing this to the best of their ability. And I think they're doing phenomenal work, even given the timelines that they're in. And, you know, they also are tackling so many other diseases that aren't just infectious, chronic disease, et cetera. And so there's so much material there that we can be looking at. In terms of also advocating for the health and well-being of our folks, I think it is something for us to think about at that policy level from a workforce perspective. My colleagues at Mason have other, you know, kind of lenses to policy, so I want to defer your readers to them. But the lens I look at it is from that workforce perspective. 1 out of 2 teachers nationally is burned out today, and they oftentimes will leave the profession within their first 5 years of teaching. That's a workforce issue as much as that's a tragedy for those teachers that are so excited to start this service-oriented profession, and then they're leaving within that amount of time. The military is having struggles with both suicide as well as other forms of mental illness, and is doing as much as they can to address it, but there's still a rising prevalence there. And so there's a lot of really smart people working on those kinds of concerns. The healthcare system, actually, our physicians are burned out today, and we have a real problem with physician suicide, actually, that not many in the public know about. They have a higher prevalence of suicide than the military at this time. And so, you know, there's unfortunately a lot of bad news in that space of how are we not helping people, not in those very critical moments, although of course we would want to stop anything tragic from happening, but how can, you know, we actually back up the runway several steps or years even to what were some of the kind of internal policies where people were pushing themselves too far or the expectations were too high. or folks didn't feel like they could pull over, one of the techniques in a lot of my campaign work is to create internal champions, a buddy idea, right? We have accountability buddies, maybe in our fitness regimen, but to have someone that we could turn to and what I call backstage time, to be able to support us compassionately, and that we can practice that skill of compassion. Because while stress is contagious, so too is that well-being experience. And my own research has shown that social support can predict well-being. So that's the good news. So we know on the left hand that stress can be contagious, and it can be tough on those around us as well as our own self. And we know that if we actually reach out for support, service, help, whatever words people like, that the irony is in the ask of the help as well as the help itself, then we get to the well-being solution. So we've got to start talking about it, would be the lens I would offer, and creating policies where folks are not penalized for reaching out for social support or frankly mental health support, that there's not any policy implications or stigma implications.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that about stigma, because I recently was working with a group of high school students, and they were social entrepreneurs, and they had all these incredible ideas about these projects and these companies really that could help people. And I would say at least 70 to 80% of those project ideas were surrounded in some way around mental health.
Beautiful.
And
that's awesome.
It was amazing to see how open they were in talking about it, because I think the younger generations are more free in their ability to express themselves and to talk about those sometimes hard things. Whereas I know in my generation in particular, those aren't things we necessarily talked about. So it was so encouraging to see so many young people very open about it, and also open about how big of a problem it is.
Yes, yes, and I think that's the first level of awareness, where it's coming out of those closed doors, and it's coming out of the quiet secrets that people are hiding, being willing to come out and be open about their stress or their need for support, and keeping in mind that people don't often wake up and say, I'm high stress today, or I'm low stress. It's geeks like me that are measuring their stress level, that are, whether it's through, psychophysiologic measures, big words for like things like your wearable, or a survey that we ask you to fill out. In that kind of stress testing, we know that there's that white jacket effect, that people can get more stressed just when they think about it.
Sure.
But to your point, I think it is good news that folks are coming forward with this need. And I think in some cases, it's almost a dangerous thought to think that because we've started to break down that ice of the stigma of mental health support, now the service-oriented organizations and providers that provide that support, we've got, from a business perspective, we've got a kind of a supply and demand issue. And so, when folks are willing and able to ask for help, we've got to have it teed up that they can get it, and that they can get it sooner than later, because otherwise we might make the problem a little worse.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, you have an awesome responsibility at George Mason, and really preparing future generations to focus on this important topic. Can you talk a little bit about the work you do at GMU?
Sure. I'm honored to be an assistant professor, and in our Department of Global and Community Health, and that's in our College of Health and Human Services. So that's a lot to listen to. So my work, I'm blessed to be with a group of colleagues that are looking at all different kinds of health and wellness and disease prevalence, and really looking at it from a population health perspective globally. And we look, we like to think that the globe is made up of communities at Mason. So all of us have our own niche there in the department. We have both undergraduate and graduate programs where we're training folks in public health, and have nationally ranked programs at both levels. And so I'm honored to teach myself. My work is looking at that community-based participatory research, where I'm less of that kind of lab scientist on the back end, kind of respect my colleagues in that space, but I'm more of that implementation science person that figures out how do we bring what the science is telling us to the public so they don't miss out on it, and then how can we actually bring the curiosities that are happening in the public back to those scientists to get some deeper investigation. Our students are, in my classes, are looking at everything from leadership and advocacy, similar to the points you were making, figuring out what kind of public health issues they care about, and what's the process of leaning in and bringing that forward. how we can communicate science information in a way that's palatable to the public, that's intriguing, and that helps them to, again, not miss out on what they need to know. We also do a lot of work actually influencing policy. One of my colleagues has done some incredible work in Africa where his research on tick-borne illness actually made a big impact on policy in an area for screening. So I could go on and on about with adoration for them, but I'm lucky that our students are curious at Mason, and they come here because they want to be innovative while they're making an impact. And we're really blessed that I get to work with them every day and kind of get out of their way and support them in making that impact.
That's great. Well, we actually have a caller tonight who has a question. Annie from Great Falls wanted to know, what is the future of this well-being care in our society?
What a great question. You know, I wish I had that crystal ball.
Sure.
One of my strengths, for folks who know the Strengths Finder instrument, it's this kind of assessment tool where you figure out your strengths. One of my strengths is futuristic. And what that means is I'm fascinated with what's coming and what's next, right? So I can say I'm also positive, which is one other one. So of course I want to see what's coming in a good way.
Right.
But I think what we're getting to now is that we as human systems, individually and collectively, are catching up to this incredibly fast-paced world. And much like maybe our caveman ancestors had to kind of deal with the innovation of fire and start living differently, I would imagine.
Yes.
I don't remember, I wasn't around. But now we kind of have that innovation of all the technology and the speed with which we're able to communicate with each other and get things done. We're also finding new ways to be able to manage that within ourselves and to adapt to that. We see it in our children from an evolutionary perspective. They can, you know, my children, all three of them can look at screens and multitask and do 3 things, whereas my older brain does not have that evolutionary capability. So the good news is I think that because we have the combination of that kind of physiologic adaptation, we've got hopefully more openness about mental health support, where, you know, I'd love, we get to a place now where we get in our cars and we put on our seatbelts without thinking.
Right.
We go to restaurants without smoking. When I was a girl in the 70s, those were not things that we took for granted, that we actually didn't have to do those things. And so I'd love to see a world where we didn't have to be having conversations about promoting mental health, because it would be so embedded in our society that we're understanding each other's humanity and being more compassionate.
That's great. Well, we just have about a minute left, but at the last segment we talked about you're an Amazon bestseller. Tell us about your book and where people can go to learn more about you and your research and the work you've done.
Well, thank you. Well, as I mentioned, I'm at that kind of foot in real world, foot in research space, and I've been there for a while, even before being honored to be at Mason, and still now in the health campaigns I'm working on. So really, both my books are health campaigns. Wellbeing Ultimatum was my first book. It was more about how do you get strategic about your well-being. And actually, because I know leaders I've worked with don't like being told what to do, they need a framework. Right. And Genius Breaks gives us tips on how to move during our workday. And they're both available on my website, drsusiecarmack.com.
Great. So to learn more about you, go to drsusiecarmack.com. Thank you for being with us this evening. Thank you for sharing your evening with us as we explore more about health, fitness, and well-being. Good evening.